Hello, good evening, my friends. How are you all? It's so good to see everyone. We're going to continue to allow our friends to join us, but I wanted to say hello as you're all here today. I appreciate everyone being here on a wonderful Tuesday. I hope your weather is as beautiful as ours is here in Texas. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Glennis Chester, and I am your host for the NFRW Empower Hour. The goal of this series is to provide in-depth discussions on issues that are forefront in our culture by experts that are just the very tops in their respective fields. And we want you to have the tools that you need to be the most effective that you can be in your conversations today. So we want to give you every tool that you need to have in your arsenal that you could possibly use to be an effective communicator. And in order to do that, our program today is going to discuss communication. And we all know how important communication is. It is, I think more than anything else, probably the cornerstone of what we do. So we will be talking about both effective messaging and having difficult conversations, because we know we all have to have those difficult, embarrassing, uncomfortable conversations. So let's go into it prepared. Know what you're doing before you go in. Get rid of the cringeworthy part of it and go in with confidence. Go in with a happy heart. Be that happy warrior and know that you're going in on the right side of the argument. And it doesn't have to be an argument because we're winning the hearts and minds. I'm so excited about our presenter tonight, but before I introduce her, I do want to get to just a little bit of housekeeping. Please keep yourselves muted throughout the program. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will get to them at the end of the program, or at least as very many as we can. The last couple of times we haven't had a lot of questions, so we've been able to get to all of them, which was fantastic. But please do ask your questions. And if we can't, for some reason, get to every single one, I promise you, I go through all of the complete chat after the program, and I will answer every single one via email if you've got a contact information in there, or if I don't have the answer, I'll contact Amy myself and say, hey, what's the answer to this question? And I will get an answer to you. Let's see, on that, I think that's about it. So our speaker today, oh, you're going to love her. Amy Clark is the founder and CEO of Rise Above Consulting. She is a fifth-generation Texan, which if you're from Texas, you know that's kind of a big deal. She has actively served in grassroots politics for many years, including 2 terms as the vice chair of the Republican Party of Texas. She utilizes her expertise in messaging and communication to expand and energize the Republican Party because, like me, she believes that communicating personal values is the key to winning the hearts and minds of Americans. Amy is a member of the Nueces County Republican Women in South Texas and someone I am very blessed to call my very dear friend. I cannot wait for you to meet her, Miss Amy Clark. So Amy, why don't you go ahead and tell us about effective communication.
Okay, well, thank you, Glennis. I appreciate that. I'm really excited to be here with everybody tonight. I'm actually dialed in from a family road trip. So I'm kind of huddled in a corner, and hopefully my little guy won't burst in here. But it is summertime, and so that I'm in Maine right now, where I can't get warm, and for a Texan, 50 degrees in the summer is pretty cold. So I have a little bit of a stuffy nose. So please forgive me. But let me go straight to our presentation. I'm going to share my screen here, and does that work, Glennis? Are we good? Are we good? Okay.
It looks terrific.
Okay, great. Well, Glennis asked me to come on tonight and to share with everybody about something that is very dear to my heart, as Glennis was saying, messaging and communication. And right now, if you look at the political landscape as we get ready to go into the month that will start it all for the 2022 elections, we can see that the messaging battle is ours to lose. And what do I mean by that? If anybody even caught the news I believe it was yesterday out of San Antonio, that our First Lady, and it doesn't even merit bringing up, but if you haven't seen the blunder that the First Lady made in San Antonio, Texas, you should probably take a look. But I think more than just a blunder, it is yet again an insight into the heart that the progressive left lacks, and that they don't have for people. They are elitist. They are pursuing a specific agenda, and it just rolls right over the people that we as conservatives care about, the people who we are, the people who our neighbors are, and even the people we don't agree with, they're still our neighbors. And that's what messaging is about connecting on those values. So as we go into this tonight, I'm going to put this challenge to you that this election, the cycle and the messaging battle is ours to lose. And so we have to make sure that we don't lose it and we capitalize on that advantage of where we are. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. So tonight we're going to talk about, what do we want to say? What are the important messages for us as Republicans? We're going to talk about how to craft that message, whether you are a candidate, helping a candidate, or just going to be speaking to people in your group or your personal circle, even just on social media. I also want to get into difficult conversations. How do we have that touchy subject when somebody close to us brings up an issue that needs to be discussed? And then I'm going to do a few practical tips. So let me begin with this. Again, excuse me. The truth is under attack. We see it today in every avenue, especially on social media, especially from mainstream media. There is a messaging war out there, and it's being waged on every front. And if you have teenagers, you realize how frightening it is that the messaging war is being waged against them or towards them, and everything that the messages that they're bombarded with. And so it is the fact that truth and logic are irrelevant to the left that should scare us the most, because the facts are whatever they are made to be that day. I put on here moral relativism, which is, I think, something that we all need to be aware of, and that principle that there's nothing right and there's nothing wrong and everything's just okay. You know, nobody in history was really very good and there's nothing to shoot for. And that view that ethics, that there isn't a morality, is probably one of the most dangerous things that we're facing right now, again, especially with our young people. And of course, we understand that mainstream media furthers the cause of the left. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time. Okay, so too often as conservatives, this is what our message sounds like, right? And I actually saw this sign on one of my road trips into New Mexico one time. This was a sign on somebody's gate, and it says, due to recent budget cuts, the rising cost of electricity, gas, and oil, and the current state of the economy, the light at the end of the tunnel has been turned off, right?
Oh.
So I think too often that is how we come across to people, is that everything's wrong, everything's bad. And especially when we're not the ones in charge in government, it's just anti this, and we're anti the president, and we're anti the Congress, and we're anti. And that's important to stand firm against the things that are being done and said at that level. But it's also important to be for something. People follow leaders that are for something, not just against something. So oftentimes our message is like this. Why aren't you working? Oh, there you go. I'm so angry, I made a sign. I pulled this off of years ago from Occupy Wall Street, but I thought this said so much in one sign, right? I'm just so angry at what's going on, and you don't know how to express it, so you just make a sign. Well, of course, nobody's going to follow a sign either. So we have to learn how to communicate effectively. This is what our message should sound like. This is one of the most effective political messages in all of American history. Are you ready for this? No Stamp Act. 3 words. Change the world. They heard this from across the ocean, right? The Stamp Act was repealed in 1 year, even before the revolution, because the colonists were so angry and had such a succinct message. So I want you to think, as we go through this, No Stamp Act. It's simple, it's effective. This is what we need to go for, right? Something everybody can get behind. We want to be simple, compelling, and relevant. So what is the purpose of communication? All it is to give and receive messages. It's not hard. We do it every single day. The problem is we're not aware of the way that we're giving those messages. We're not aware oftentimes of the way people are receiving those messages. And it's, if you're a parent, you know, you often have to tell your kids, it's not what was said, it's how it was heard so many times, right? It may not have been what you intended, but the way your sibling received it was not good, right? So we need to be aware of how people are receiving the messages that we give as well. Good communication is centered around values. That's important. We're going to talk about that a lot. Good communication is centered around values. If I don't know what's important to you, if I don't care what's important to you, we're going to communicate about what? The weather, maybe sports, right? Nothing on a significant deep level. It's just here. If you want to go deep with someone, if you want to talk to them about something as important as principles in politics, you've got to understand their values and how to communicate your message and the parameters of those values. Political communication is special. Why? I'm going to skip to number 3, mostly because it deals with controversy, right? We're not all on the same page. When we deal with controversy, again, I went straight to the end. We want to seek that common ground where possible. How do we do that? Go to number 1. It's your shared values. Learn to connect with others via values. What do we have in common? What's important to you? Number 2 is emotions. And I'm always want to be careful when I express this to you, because we are the party of we should be the party of logic and not the party of emotion, but we can't be emotionless. Too often we get, called haters of this and haters of that because Republicans are straight down the line logical. But emotion is to appeal to that, to validate their emotion, to validate their worldview, to assume what it's like from their shoes, but not to play on emotion. Remember, we are not the party that says that grandma is going to get pushed off the cliff. Do you remember that accusation against Republicans from the Democrats years ago with Obamacare, that we just want to push grandparents off the cliff? We don't care about older people. They are manipulating emotions, whereas we want to appeal to the emotions and our shared values. So let me go to this. So when we talk about values, excuse me, when you look at progressive media, which you may not do often, but it is insightful on occasion. If you study the words and the themes that come up again, I pulled some up here for you so you don't have to go do it. Empathy, fairness, equality, equity, freedom, common good, choice, dignity. These are all great words, right, in and of themselves. And you can see how these values and these themes and these words appeal to people, right? Who is against justice? Who would be against fairness, right? And so they are coming across to people quite successfully, especially younger people, through the lens of these great and noble values. When Republicans talk, how do we talk? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Here's some examples of their frames, right, of their messaging. My body, my choice. We hear that. Tax the rich, save the planet. And my personal favorite, living in South Texas, there's no border crisis. So how do Republicans, these are our values. When you read our media, our blogs, our social media posts, these are the things that we focus on. We tend to focus on self-reliance, limited government, personal responsibility, parental control, hard work. These mean something to us, and these are important. But they don't have that same kind of nuance that the other ones did. Does that make sense? So when I say limited government, I know what that means because I'm a political wonk, right? I understand this, I love this. But if I'm talking about limited government to somebody who's just trying to get their kid to school safely, right? Just trying to make ends meet, to a single mom trying to pay for school and buy school supplies, and she doesn't want to hear about limited government, right? Even though it's important, and I'm not going to triangulate on my view of that, but I need to present my case to her in a different way. It's not about limited government. It's about unlimited opportunity that happens when government gets out of your way. So let's talk about that. So the common themes, again, for Republicans, limited government, tax breaks, states' rights, these are important, and we do not need to waver from these or walk away from these, but we need to present them in a frame that is going to resonate with people and not be quite so wonky, if you will. So I've mentioned frames. So what is their frame of reference? What's yours? What's theirs? Again, great typical progressive frames are empathy. Perfect example of this, Bill Clinton. What was it? I feel your pain. It's been so long. Okay, I feel your pain, right? They feel you, they understand you. It's all about the common good. Now, of course, if you're a student of history of any kind, you know, when people come at you talking about the common good, you should run the other way because it never means what they say it means. But those are frames, again, that sound really good and pleasing to people. We come in talking about bootstraps and less government. Again, these are important policy items. These are the way that we feel as conservatives, and that's great, but we need to put them into a different frame. Now, what do I mean by that? The founding fathers gave us three of the best frames we could ever have: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Nothing sounds better than those. Not empathy, not equity. Here it is: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So how do we take those and frame our issues in the light of our conservative values? Don't try to make it fit, reframe it. All right, so the way we approach it is going to affect the way it comes out. What do I mean by that? What does the left do? The left tries to divide us on every way there is to divide us, right? From gender, oh boy, is that one divided now, to age, to wealth, to race, any way that they can divide us, because we know when you can divide a people, you can conquer people. And they focus on those differences and they pit those groups against one another. And that works to some extent, but there's also no honor among thieves, right? And so the greatest electoral wins that we've seen in presidential history have not come from a divider, they've come from a unifier, right? Think of Ronald Reagan and his incredible 49 state electoral win. And so that it is the idea that we're all in this together and we're all Americans. And I think that's what people really are seeking at the end of the day. Again, we come down to moral relativism. And finally, the left tries to obfuscate. What do I mean by that? I love that word. They make it, literally, it means to darken, to obscure, to bewilder. They do this with the truth. They do this with morals, what's right and what's wrong. They do this with religion. Even some religious groups come in, and people that profess to be churches come in and obfuscate what we know to be the truth. And so this is how the left gets their outcome. Now, what is the right approach? This is the way that we don't always do it as Republicans, but that we should. We have to focus on common values. What makes us Americans? What brings us together? We unite behind common sense. And I cannot stress this enough. This is what is lacking. And this is what people are seeking, even if they don't understand it. Common sense, right? Nobody actually believes that we should defund the police. Nobody. Okay, well, maybe 0.0001% of the population, right? But it's a talking point. Nobody believes in that. So few people actually believe on, say, abortion on demand and without apology, or whatever their phrase is. Nobody actually believes that we should open the border and let people come in, people unvetted and untested, and people we don't even know who they are. So we have the common sense platform on all these issues right now, but instead we get bogged down into the muddle. And I, you know, as political conventions come around and we work on platform things and assuaging positions and that kind of stuff, we have to remember how people are viewing us from the outside and make sure that our message is clean and clear and common sense and sticks to the point of what's important. We have to stand for something. If we don't stand for something, we will fall apart as a party, as a movement, as the conservative movement altogether. And I am deeply concerned as we move forward that what has happened to the left and the Democratic Party could happen to the right and the Republican Party if we do not stand for something and unify behind the common sense. And of course, we have to bring clarity to our message. One thing that you'll hear from me, and I tell my candidates this, I tell people this in press training, just deliver the message and stop talking, right? Whether that's if you're ever talking to the media, if you're ever giving an interview, or just talking to your friend, say what you want to say and then stop talking. We'll get back to that in a minute. I'm just going to repeat that several times to drill it in your head. So when I have a message, when I want to deliver a message to you, I think about two things. If I'm writing a speech as a candidate, if I'm going to give an interview for the media, it's about defining yourself and differentiating yourself. Who are we? What are we about? Why do we have the best candidates? Why is our form of governance the best? Put on a more simple level, how is voting Republican going to make your life better? This is what people want to hear. If we don't define ourselves, our opponents will. And I cannot say that enough. And we are so behind the curve as conservatives on this. and wind up having to say, we're not haters, we're not this, we're not that, because we let the left get ahead. And of course, they have the advantage with the mainstream media, that's true, but we let them define us, and we don't take that time to define ourselves. If you don't define yourself, your opponent will. The maxim in politics is, if you are explaining, you're what? I know Glennis knows this. If you're explaining, you're losing, right? If you're saying, I'm not this, or that's not true, you've already lost the battle of communication. So get ahead of the game and define yourself. And what does it mean to differentiate yourself? The main point of this is the consequence. What is the real risk to Americans, to America, if progressivism continues on the rise, if progressive candidates continue to be elected, right? So it's differentiation, not just what sets us apart, how my candidate is different from your candidate, but there's a consequence. And again, I don't believe in manipulating people's emotion or playing on their fear, but if you don't actually believe that there's a consequence to voting, then why are we here, right? I mean, we all baseline should be able to answer the question, why does it matter? Why should I be able to vote? They're all the same, right? That's your homework tonight. If you've never thought about how to articulate that in 30 seconds, then that's your homework. There is a real consequence for progressive policies, and that's what we have to communicate to people. It does matter, and their vote is important. So we want to state those risks. We see one of the only advantages of not being the party in power as that the risks are right there on TV every single day. They are in trouble at the polls because we see the price at the grocery store. We see the price at the gas pump. These are some of the consequences. If you can find somebody, a news outlet that covers it, watch what's happening at the border. This is of incredible importance to us in Texas. I can't even begin to express to you what is happening at our southern border. There are real consequences. So what is at stake for the Americans? You know, I'm here in Maine, right? And I look around and I think they have no idea what's going on in my backyard. No idea. Now, maybe they don't care, but the things that are happening to us are going to trickle up. And what happens, whether it's illegal immigration or cutting off funding for the police force, it makes our communities much less safe. We have to use differentiating phrases. What do I mean by that? Unlike the other party, ... though the Democrats have promised us X, we can see, not even history, right? We can see what's happening right now is Y. And we don't want that to continue. We have to save the republic. We have to stand for our values. So when you develop that message, whether it's giving a speech, talking to the media, or just talking to your friend, you need to remember a couple points. People need to hear something 7 times before it sinks in. That's why I'm going to keep having that slide of deliver your message and stop talking. 7 times before it sinks in, right? You need to stay on message, stay on message. You need to stay on message, and then you need to stay on message. You know what you want to say, and you focus and you don't divert from it. You especially don't let emotion divert you from it. Not anger, not aggravation, not frustration. Don't be upset. Stay on your message and don't emote. If you get to the point where you're angry or frustrated, walk away, right? Peace, peace, truth. Step aside, come back to it a different day. When we're angry, we're not in control. So you want to be passionate, but stop before you get angry so that we can stay on the message. I love to tell people, especially my candidates, no matter what the question is, your answer never changes. Never changes, right? Your answer is going to be the same, and that's your message, no matter what the question is. We want to repeat it until it fades away. If they are asking you about it, if they're still talking about it in the media, it's still relevant, and people need to know how we believe. So we want to keep it relevant, impactful, real, and under control. Again, what do I mean by that? Not emotion. I cannot stress to you enough the damage that you can do on social media. So we're talking about interpersonal communication and talking, but I want you to understand all of this applies to social media as well. So when you forward that angry article or the half-true article from a shady source, when you respond in anger to somebody's comment on Facebook, you are not keeping it relevant, impactful, real, or under control, right? And risking doing more damage. You want to build up a social media profile that people can look up to, right? And that people see. the Bible tells us by their fruits, our fruits, they will know us, right? And so that is definitely as true in communication as it is with anything else. So be the kind of person that somebody will come to right before the election and say, oh, Margaret, I haven't studied, tell me who you're voting for, because I don't have time to look it up, right? Because that's the ultimate goal, to be that person that people believe in and know that you are a person of character and understand their point of view. So let me skip over here. Okay, so we don't want to make assumptions about what people believe or what's important to them. We want to ask them, we want to talk to them. Don't make it about you. This isn't about us personally, right? This has got to be bigger than us. Too often, candidates, people in power, the other party makes it about them, and it doesn't resonate with people. They want to know that they are important. Oh, look, there it is again. And we're going to deliver the message and stop talking. So let me skip to having difficult interpersonal conversations. Now, sometimes this could be, can apply to other things that are going on in life beyond politics, but let's keep it to the political frame here. I have a good point on here. Remember, when someone asks you a pointed or hostile question, it is likely because they care deeply about the issue and they see it solely from their point of view. I'm going to repeat that again. It's because they care deeply about the issue and or they just see it from their point of view. When you take the time to frame your answer in terms of values, you may be given the benefit of the doubt. You are more likely to be listened to when you take the time to hear them. If you avoid it altogether, if you just tell them they're crazy, if you throw up your hands, you've already shut down the conversation and you're not going to get anywhere. Now, you may not understand why this issue is important to somebody. You may have no idea why they feel the way they do, right? Obviously, you are a conservative and they're a progressive, and so you're not going to meet in the middle on most issues, but you don't know the road they took to get to that point of view. And so that's what's important, is to learn to connect with them on values so you can get your point across. So we're going to ask what is really important to them? What is behind this? Somebody's really angry or really upset about, pick something, immigration or whatever, why is that important to them? How have they arrived at that conclusion? Have they come from a Democrat household? Have they just been reading too much Apple News? What is it? Where are they on the political spectrum? And then you've got to evaluate, is this really the best time to continue the conversation? Now, the answer to that, anytime it's on social media, is always no, right? You're never going to win an argument in the comment section on Facebook. And I will say that until my last breath. And I know that there are people who will not listen and not believe me, but that is not the place to try to win a conversation. So look for the best time to continue it. Excuse me. To have a productive conversation on values, you want to persuade somebody versus alienating them. It is not us versus them. It can't be, because that's not connecting on values. Remember, people want to follow a leader who unites them. So what do we have in common? We want to acknowledge what they believe, but we don't have to agree with it. And I'm going to tell you a very useful phrase about that in a minute. And then we want to question them. We want to pull information. This is especially important with younger people. Ask them, that's really interesting. Tell me about that, right? How did you arrive at that? Or tell me more about what that looks like, or tell me what that policy or that plan looks like 10 years in the future, rather than belittle. Don't belittle young people, right? That's not going to resonate with them. Talk to them, take your time with them. And remember, this may be a lengthy process if it's your niece or nephew or grandkid, or even just somebody but take the time to question them and not belittle them or berate them for their values. All right, and this is one of my favorites. Okay, so first, one of the most important things is to identify with whom you are speaking. And in honor of my mom, I named, there's two versions of progressives, right? The bless your heart liberals. And that comes from my mom. Bless their heart. Bless her heart. And if you're not from Texas, maybe that phrase doesn't mean anything to you, but for us, it means, isn't that sweet how they're so wrong? Oh, goodness. So with a bless your heart liberal, you recognize your common values and try to look about how maybe they have been misled on some of the issues. Is it habit? Have they generationally voted this way? Is it knee jerk? What do I mean by that? Well, if all the news you're getting is from Instagram or Facebook, you know, our feed just plays into, it's an echo chamber. We see more of what we respond to. And so maybe that's the only thing that they see. It's certainly the only thing they see on TV. So with a bless your heart liberal, we want to try to inform and expose any faulty logic. And then there are hardcore liberals, right? So if you're a political candidate and you were looking to send out a mailer, you've got, it's the 30-40-30 principle, right? 30% are in your base at any given time. So hardcore people on the right. Then you have the hardcore people on the left, right? Which you probably won't waste your money sending anything to. And then you've got the 40% in the middle that kind of swing either way. So with the hardcore liberals, you're probably not going to change their mind. Think Nancy Pelosi. Now, even with Nancy Pelosi, you know, there's something that we have somewhere, there's something that we have in common, but we're not going to spend great amounts of time trying to have a difficult conversation with someone who is just absolutely dead set hardcore liberal, because you're probably not going to get anywhere, right? At some point, I love the phrase from the Bible that talks about just shaking the dust off your sandals, you know, and walking away. But we can understand what they want us to talk about, what they've led us to that point, and try to discredit their argument. Because sometimes, remember, it's not about them, it's about the people that are listening to you, right? If there are more people around, other people in the area, or other people that are reading your Facebook feed, recognize what they want to talk about, discredit their arguments, of course, expose that faulty logic, and think about the ones ahead of you. Okay. There we go. All right. So this is what happens when our approach affects our outcome. This is one way that we don't get our point across as conservatives, right? Someone expresses an opposing position. What do? We criticize or reject it. You're wrong. That's stupid. That's ridiculous, blah, 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 blah. What happens if you go around the circle? It locks the person into their opinion, right? So they express their position that we don't believe in, we criticize it, we reject it right off the bat, it locks them into their opinion. Now, what if you've given your point of view, someone criticizes you, and you become defensive? Then what happens? Now you're both locked into your opinion, and nobody's getting anywhere else. So what do we want to do? We want to not have the usual outcome. There'd be 3 R's from a book that's called Waking the Sleeping Giant. And if you haven't read it, it is a great book to really test yourself, to challenge yourself to get out there and have difficult conversations. Waking the Sleeping Giant. But they have the principle of the 3 R's, and that's to recognize, reframe, and refocus. Now, this is helpful whether you are dealing with the media or just having that interpersonal communication. Again, we want to recognize with whom we are dealing. Are they the hardcore liberals? Or are they the as I say, the bless your heart liberals? We want to reframe it, right? Reframe what they've said, and we want to refocus. And let's talk a little bit about that. When I want to acknowledge without agreeing, right? How do I do that? This is the most useful phrase. This is how I recognize with whom I'm dealing, and I want to acknowledge what they've said. Okay. I hear what you're saying. Have you thought about this? Or, I hear what you're saying, and that's an interesting point of view. And I'm struggling a little bit to understand how you got there. Something like that. But the phrase, I hear what you're saying, and then I've got the ... is the most useful phrase. And it works in marriage too, right? I mean, just between me and you, I can't say that loud because we're in the other room. But yes, dear, I hear what you're saying. Interesting. So I have not agreed with you, but I have acknowledged that you have said something, right? And now, all joking aside, that this is important to you. It is acknowledgement, not acceptance. I can also verbally reflect what you said. I can empathetically validate. I see that you were really upset by this, and that is telling me that this is important to you. And I want to understand why this is important to you. I want you to tell me more about that, because I don't understand how you got there. Now, granted, if this is a perfect stranger, that's kind of an intimate conversation. So these have to be tailored based on the situation. But I verbally reflect. If they are one way, I want to reflect that. I want to mirror it. I want to use the same words that they've used. I'm going to stop right here and say, if they are angry, if they are yelling, this is not the time, right? Anger and emotion do not make for productive conversations, and you do not deserve to be yelled at. And hopefully you're not the one doing the yelling, but that should go without saying. We should behave. We also want to acknowledge, I hear you. Or my friend Tony Ann, who is on the call today, one of her most brilliant statements, and she's just the master of doing this, but she says, okay, so what I just heard you say, or what I think I heard you say was, and she just repeats it right back to you. And it's so brilliant, because then you think, oh wait, is that what I said? Okay. But in a conversation, to acknowledge that is so important. I hear what you're saying. And then we want to reframe it. The best way that we can reframe it, let me check my time, is through asking questions, because that makes them explain their logic, right? And if there's no logic behind it, it's kind of hard to answer those questions. This is what I would refer to, you can use the Socratic method, right? To bring them around with the questions. So I hear what you're saying. What specifically do you mean by that? When you say defund the police, what does that mean to you? How does that work in a city of 1 million people? You know, I live in Houston or whatever it is, and that how does that work? Or, okay, can you tell me more about that? Now, one of the best examples for this back in Texas history was when our current governor ran against a woman named Wendy Davis, who you probably don't know of now because she kind of faded into oblivion. But her thing was there were bumper stickers everywhere that said, I stand with Wendy. And people went around saying, I stand with Wendy, I stand with Wendy. And it was on the cover of Texas Monthly and it was everywhere. And all you had to do was ask somebody, okay, what exactly does Wendy stand for? And it was like complete and utter silence because nobody knew. It was just a slogan, an empty slogan. So make them explain their logic through questions. What exactly do you mean by that? Again, don't be snarky. Borrowing a word from my teenagers, don't be snarky, right? Ask like you mean it and that you're sincere about it, or don't ask at all. So I'm like, what does that mean? You know, I'm not suggesting that, but seriously, look them in the eye. I hear what you're saying. Tell me more about that. What does that mean? And then again, we have the, what I heard you say was this. Then we want to refocus them. What do I mean by that? So we recognized who they are, why they might be saying that. We want to reframe it, and then we want to refocus it, right, onto the issue that we want to talk about. What do we want to talk about? I have to know what I want to talk about. That means I have to study in advance. Let me stop right here and give you some encouragement. You do not have to be experts on every topic. You do not have to know numbers and percentages, and you don't have to be as well versed as the people on TV, but you know what's important to you, right? You know what you believe. You need to take some time to be able to articulate why you believe it. But what you believe is important, and your message and what you have to contribute is important. It's just as important as any of the talking heads on the news or in social media, right? But you have to believe in yourself and have that confidence so that you can go out there and say, no, you know what? I do know what I'm talking about. And I do know, whether it's from a historical perspective, an economic perspective, maybe you're a small business owner, maybe you're a retired teacher, whatever it is, just a mom, right, trying to make her way. You do understand it is important to you. All issues are women's issues, right? And so that basic understanding of our core conservative principles will help you through any conversation if we just keep it simple. Remember, no stamp back. Okay, so when we meet with objections, here's some specific language to use when you run into those objections, okay? I've divided these into 4 categories, and the first one I call personal understanding. So you can say something you're listening to them and you say, okay, well, you know, I came to the realization a long time ago, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, right? I came to the realization the other day when I read about the true impact of the lack of fossil fuel production. I didn't understand what that was doing to our economy. And I realized the other day in this article, here, let me find it for you. But the impact, did you know the impact that has on middle-class families? I mean, it is killing the middle-class families, and with a cold winter, you know, on and on and on. But let them know that maybe you felt the way that they did. Maybe you thought it from their perspective until you came to the realization that ... Or you can say, I can see why that sounds like a good idea. you know, I can see with the light of what's going on with some of the stories in the media, why you think that the resource may need to be, you know, deferred over here from this, or, you know, I can understand. But let me tell you what I've seen happen in my community. Let me tell you what I've seen happen with our tax dollars or whatever it is. So, and then you want to see identifying flaws in that. So again, I'm coming up with this language because I'm trying to dance around saying you're wrong, because actually nobody really wants to hear that they're wrong. You may have encountered this before with people. Nobody wants to hear that they're wrong. And so if you can say something like, those who believe this are wrong, right? Or those who believe this, which is the same thing they believe, but you're kind of putting it over here. Those who object to this plan, I don't think have taken into consideration what it's going to do for this country, right? Those who object to fossil fuels or opening up the pipeline or, you know, whatever it is, haven't taken into consideration. So you're taking it off of them and not saying you're wrong and I'm right, because obviously that doesn't make for effective communication. You are putting it on another group and kind of helping them see that way. Again, why they are incorrect. They said raising taxes would help, but instead, you know, unemployment's driving up, prices are up, blah, 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 blah. And finally, we want to offer a solution. And if I had a magic wand and I could do anything to make Republicans be better communicators, it would be that they would be the party of logic and not emotion, that they would stay on their message and quit talking, but also that we would be the party with solutions. We know that there are problems. There have always been problems since the dawn of time. Politics has always been messy. I read a quote from St. Thomas More in the 1100s that talked about if, I'm going to get it wrong, but it basically said anybody who campaigns for office doesn't deserve to be in office or something like that. It was a quote from the 1100s about dirty campaigning. And I just thought, oh my gosh, you know, there's nothing new under the sun. There've always been problems and there will always be problems, but people want to follow somebody who has solutions, right? And even if the solution that we have doesn't look like what they have heard, doesn't look like what they might come up with, the idea is that we have a solution and that we can be humble about it as Republicans and say, you know, this is what we think works. I'd love to bring you to the table to talk more about that. But, you know, in line with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or in line with limited government and personal responsibility, or whatever our frames are going to be, right? We have to be versed in those solutions at all the levels, right? Are they better than the status quo? Is what we are offering people, and this is, I mean, a gut check question, is what we as conservatives are offering to Americans better than the status quo? And that should be a really easy yes. But we have to be true to our principles for that to be true. So we want to remember, again, that this communication battle is ours to lose, right? This election is ours to lose. But Republicans have managed to scrape a loss out of the hands of victory on multiple occasions, because we cannot seem to communicate our message in an unfriendly media, to an unfriendly press. So we have to offer that solution and be the kind of people that somebody wants to follow. And I love how Glenna said a happy warrior. And I could not agree with that more. We've got to be the happy warriors. So I'm going to start to wrap it up here. This is how we do it better, right? My other slides talked about if someone expresses an opposing position, someone criticizes your point of view, someone forces their idea onto you, instead of pointing the finger, getting angry, locking back, denying them, getting defensive, we need to recognize who is speaking. We need to reframe it into a question. I hear what you're saying. Tell me more about that. And then when it gets to be your turn, refocus it on your message, which of course is going to be the same no matter what. That's the approach that's going to make a difference in the end. One more thing of homework for you. I'd like you to, and I actually haven't checked this in the last couple months, so I'm hoping that this still works, but I stumbled upon a website that was called whatwouldyousay.org. Caveat, I'm not endorsing this website. I have not endorsed all the answers. I haven't read all the answers, but it is a really great, shouldn't use the word apologetics, but it is almost kind of a conservative apologetics site. And it's fascinating how people answer tough questions in less than 3 minutes. and they do it really visually, but it helps give you some points. So it's a great site to practice with. Again, don't see something on there that's not good and tell me about it. And it is a good site to get the idea of how to come at something in a short amount of time. Again, we want to never, ever, ever repeat the negative. So to close, we want to define and we want to differentiate. If you do not define yourself, if we do not define ourselves as conservatives, our opponents will define us, and too often that happens. To differentiate, what are the real consequences of not voting conservative in this election? And again, that should be obvious, but we've got to be able to articulate that. So homework number 1 was being able to articulate that. If somebody walks up to you and says, why should I even bother to vote? They're all the same. Can you answer that in 60 seconds or less with a good, solid, impassioned answer? We don't want to dig. We don't want to disown what we believe. We want to own the message and own our narrative. Okay. So ultimately, what can you do? Is your goal to win every argument? Secretly, maybe, in our relationship arguments, yeah, probably. But that is not actually an effective goal, nor is it a realistic approach to think that we can convert every person into a conservative, right? To think just like we do at every meeting. So if those are not our goals, what should our goals be, right? If we're not going to convert them at the first meeting or even at the second meeting, we can be an ambassador for our principles. And that actually is almost more of a challenge than thinking of making converts, right? To be an ambassador for our principles. If we, now look, I mean, you guys are, this is a beautiful summer evening and you're on a call about politics and y'all are a very special group, right? And so most people are out grilling or barbecuing or, doing whatever they're going to do. And so the fact that y'all are doing this means so much that you are committed to trying to make a difference. But we also need to recognize that we are a special group and not everybody lives in the realm that we do or sees things the way that we do, red and blue and, keep Texas red and vote red and this kind of thing. If we could do a thinking adjust and look at it more from the standpoint of principles when we talk to people who aren't political, and believe it or not, there are plenty of people who don't enjoy politics. It is shocking, I know, but most people really don't want anything to do with it. And so if we come at them instead of red and blue, we come at them with principles, right? Go back to that framing: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. How will you be more free? How will you have more control of your money and your future? How will your kids have better options than we did? Because after all, isn't that really what the American dream is? We have to use those principles to get the political points across. To be an ambassador for those principles is the best thing we can be. But that also calls into consideration our character. By our fruits, they will know us. And we must be good ambassadors for our principles. We cannot control the candidates, and sometimes talk about cringeworthy, right? Some things that candidates say, and we can't control that. But what we can control is what goes on our social media, what we say, what we do, and how we live and be guided by those principles. It's just like, y'all, if you are coming out of church on Sunday and you cut somebody off on the way to the restaurant after church, you know what I'm saying? Like, that is not being a good ambassador. We need to practice what we preach. So again, our goal, if we went back, our goal isn't to win every argument. Your goal is to plant the seeds of truth. You may not be the one that convinces somebody on an issue, but you've discredited that faulty logic. See, in the bottom, I said, sometimes you're planting a seed of doubt and a misguided message, right? Maybe they've never heard that viewpoint was faulty before. So you plant those seeds and let them be watered by somebody else, right? Let it grow. And the next time they hear it, and the next time they hear it, sometimes it may take people. I mean, if you've believed a certain way for decades, you're not going to change your mind right away. And neither would you. So we plant those seeds of truth, and we do it humbly and as good ambassadors for our principle. And I love quotes. And here's the last quote I'm going to leave you with. St. Francis was attributed with saying, preach the gospel always, and when necessary, use words. How does that relate to politics? Just what I was saying, to be a good ambassador. We need to preach our message. We need to carry our principles out there and those values that are important to us. And when necessary, use words. One of the greatest examples of that is what is happening on the life issue right now. And, you know, people are screaming horrible things in the streets, again, that the majority of Americans don't believe. This is the time for us to put our money where our mouth is, right? To walk the walk, to help those pregnancy centers, to do everything we can to help those who are wanting to adopt, and to really invest in those pro-life principles. I mean, it's a perfect example of it. And the other things that are going on, we don't want the government to pay for everything, right? We believe in limited government. Well, we need to be the ones to be charitable to our neighbor and to love our neighbor. So this is what it's about, and the way to have good communication. So I'm going to leave my email there, and I think I left a few minutes to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Amy. That was fabulous. I'm so appreciative. In fact, in our bite-sized tools at the end of last month, we talked about bridging the gap between Republicans, and you touched on so many of the same themes, and it made my heart all warm and fuzzy. Thank you so much, because very often effective messaging is not just, we don't have difficult conversations only with Democrats. Sometimes it's within our own party, and sometimes with our own families, as you said. So it's important that we are able to speak to one another in a kind way and in a thoughtful way, because no one's going to listen to you if you're angry and attacking. Nobody listens to you. They just shut you down. So Erica, did we have any questions in the chat today?
Yes, I have one. It says, talk to us more about recognizing who is speaking. And I asked for clarification. I'm assuming that's like, if it's a bless your heart liberal or a diehard liberal, or.
Yeah, that was the point I was trying to make, where, you know, what kind of, and that's again, that's a little bit done in jest, the bless your heart liberal or that kind of thing. But mainly the point is, what are their values that took them to believe that, right? How, what is important to them? Why is that topic emotional to them? So I want to recognize that. Are they, you know, a retired teacher, and that's why they're worried about the educational system? Or have they been affected by some incident with the police, and that's why they feel like there should be a defunding of the police? But recognize who is speaking based on their values and where they're coming from. And if it is something that's deeply ingrained in them, I mean, you know, if they're a work for your Democratic congressional candidate, right, you know, don't engage in a deeply personal, you're not going to get very far on that, versus somebody who's just been watching the news or just reading these articles. So that's my point before you launch into it. So you kind of want to say, okay, that's who this person is, and this is, and if you don't know, then ask. And that's where the conversation comes in. I understand, I can tell from what you said that this is deeply personal to you. Will you tell me more about that? Because once they tell me more about that, then I will have a better idea of how I need to frame my argument or my point of view to them. And we shouldn't even use the word argument, because it's really your point of view, and it deserves to be heard. And I think sometimes when somebody's very aggressive with their point of view, we tend to think, oh, you know, but your point of view deserves to be heard as well. And in fact, it doesn't, you know, for decades, we've been kind of taught, you know, especially in the South, we don't talk about religion and politics. But I think we have seen, as culture continues to talk about religion and politics, and conservative people don't, I think that's, you know, arguably what has taken us to the point where we are. So we have to be comfortable talking about that, even if we're just planting those seeds.
Absolutely. Erica, was there anything else?
I have a question. It's one of the hardest he was basically not giving accurate information. So he was saying things like, this bill had things in it that were not it. I knew that these things were not in the bill, but again, I didn't want to like say, you know, you're wrong. So it just, you know, listen, I just don't know how to confront somebody like that is obviously doesn't have the correct information on what's inside a bill. It was basically the don't say gay bill. There's a whole bunch of information going out there that's not true of stuff that's in the bill. And so that was just one of the questions, how to talk to those people.
I think sometimes doing things in a non-direct, I mean, depending on who it is, right? Again, recognize to whom you're speaking. In a non-direct way, it would be to post on your social media a link to bill text or a link to an article. And let me do an end around and say it matters, the articles that you're putting on social media. You know, if you can, and you're really trying to convince somebody, don't put a Breitbart article up there or a OAN article or something like that. And not saying there's anything wrong with those sources, but people on the left tend to discredit those sources immediately, right? And so they say, oh, it's from Breitbart, you know, whatever. So try to find the same information on a MSN or a you know, Wall Street Journal or something like that when you can. But indirectly posting the information to social media, I have found sometimes works because you know they're going to read it, and they can read it in a non-threatening manner, right? Without you having to tell them, or just say, you know, that's interesting. And you are not the only person I've heard say that, but I'm not sure where you're getting that in the bill. Because when I read the bill, have you read the bill? It's really interesting. I could send it to you. But when I read the bill, I didn't see that at all. You know, so I'm not directly arguing with you. I'm saying, God, that's really interesting because I actually sat down and read it. Have you read it? I can send it to you. And that could sound snarky, so you need to be careful, right? But tell me, send that to me. And I've asked people that before. That is really interesting. I'm not sure where you saw that because I did not see that. Would you send that to me? You know, and then they go looking for it.
That's so much better than, would you just read the damn bill?
Well, I know, right? I mean, look, my grandma used to say, you don't have to say everything you know, which is really pretty brilliant if you think about it, because whatever the first thing that comes to your mind is generally not what should come out of your mouth. But I think, and also, if I can make one more point, sometimes we have to acknowledge that we may not be the right messenger for a certain situation. And that takes a wisdom in a lot of occasions. If it's somebody really close to us, maybe our own child, our own grandchild, or whatever it is, you know, maybe you're not the right person to deliver that. So maybe you find somebody else, you know, and have them be that. But sometimes in a very deeply personal situation, we just have to be humble and wise about it, that we may not be the best messenger, if that makes sense. And that comes to discerning. And I'm a big believer in discernment, but you know, if you are a spiritual person, I believe in, you know, praying for doors to open for conversations and help show me the right time to have this conversation, or show me the right way, or give me the right words. But I think when we try to be discerning in situations, you know, we may personally want to go out and save the world, but we are not the best messengers in every situation, right? And so I think with some humility and wisdom in there are just times where you may need to kick it to somebody else, you know?
Absolutely.
And that's not a failure. That's not avoiding a fight. I know somebody mentioned that's being wise and understanding that somebody else might be able to get to them, somebody else that was respected in a way where maybe you're too close to the situation, if that makes sense. So.
Thank you, Amy. That is so wise. I appreciate that so much. I know that you normally do this in a 2-hour format, these two subjects in a 2-hour format. So I appreciate you kind of giving us the Reader's Digest version, and I could listen to you all day long. And I know these ladies would love to as well. Pardon me.
Tell my kids you said that.
Oh my gosh, you're just brilliant. I love it. I hope you all enjoyed this month's Empower Hour, and I hope that you will join us next month on Tuesday, August 9th when we discuss parental choice and taking education back. We're going to have a panel of speakers. It's going to be terrific. I can't wait. So I hope you'll join us then. And don't forget, this will be on the NFRW website. So if the recording will be, so if you want to go back and watch it again and take notes, you're welcome to do that. Look for it and probably next week sometime. And until next month, have a great week. Bye.